Hello everyone, Ape Analytics here. Welcome to the first video of my new series, SQL. It is probably the first language you should learn if you want to land a job in analytics or data science. Because quite often, SQL is a minimum requirement or at least a preferred qualification for entry-level jobs. The problem with SQL, in my opinion, is that it's not super easy to learn. I'm not saying that it's intrinsically harder than, say, Python, but that you will struggle to grasp the concepts if you don't have a database to apply them. And most people simply don't have one. But don't you worry, the old ape has got you covered. So, what is SQL anyway? It stands for Structured Query Language. In simple terms, it's just a language to interact with a relational database. What is a relational database, you ask? Well, it's just a collection of data tables, like these. Here's a table about Star Wars characters. The name is SW, that's the schema, by the way, dot characters. We have another table here about ships, and a third one here about characters' aliases. Each table is made up of columns, sometimes referred to as variables. And each row is called a record or an observation. And what makes this database relational are, guess what, relationships between tables. Such as this one here, between the characters table and the ships table. The value 3 just means that Han Solo's ship is the Millennium Falcon, which also happens to be Lando Calrissian's ship. Here is another relationship example between the characters table and the alias table. Leia Organa is also known as Princess Leia. So, how can you learn SQL? I can suggest 3 options. Option 1 is the most natural. It is to use your company or your university's database. Great option because 1. The data is real, and 2. You should have some domain knowledge. Option 2 is to leverage some free online tools, such as CoderPad, for instance, if you select MySQL or PostgreSQL, very popular tool for interviews, W3 School's Sandbox, or Google's BigQuery, where they've made available some public datasets for free. It's very nice, especially if you want to play with bigger data. The third way is not for the faint-hearted. You basically set up your own database on your machine. I went with PostgreSQL because it's open source. Quick aside, there are many SQL-like languages: Hive, Presto, Teradata, PostgreSQL, MySQL. There are slight differences between them, but once you know one, you basically know all the others. In that course, when I say SQL, I'm actually going to be referring to PostgreSQL, but again, I don't think it really matters. Feels like I've said SQL quite a lot so far, and yet we haven't run any code. So let's query a Pokemon table before we close off this video. Try not to worry about the details at this stage, we'll cover everything in future videos. This is what a basic SQL query looks like. You select data from a table, about Pokemons in that case, and I'm gonna run it by pressing F5. The results of my query are displayed at the bottom. Each record is a Pokemon, and each column tells me about their name, their type, their points, health, attack, defense, and so on. There is absolutely no difference between the code we've just run and the code we're running now. SQL doesn't care about indentation or capitalization. So if you're not disciplined with the way you write your SQL, it can quickly become horrible to read. The last thing that I'd like to touch on is comments, which can be added in 2 ways. Let's consider this piece of code. It pulls all the columns from the Pokemon's table for Pokemons that have speed points strictly above 110. One way to add comments is to use 2 dashes. For instance, I can say here, this is a great table. This is useful to add comments line by line. The second option is to use /*. These commands can span across multiple lines, so they can be useful, for instance, to comment out a whole block of code. And if we run this, we get the full data set. Which concludes, my friend, our first SQL lesson. I hope that now you have a rough idea of what SQL is and how you can learn it. And I hope that I'll see you on the next video. You know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment to let me know what you think and would like to see next, and remember, practice makes perfect.